Elias Boone was checking the horse stall when he heard a rustling noise. His hand tightened around his Winchester as he moved quietly. Inside, two figures tall and broad-shouldered, with bronze-toned skin streaked with dust and thick black hair draping over their shoulders, were hunched over a bag of cornmeal. Two Apache sisters, Naya and Tala, each as strong and solid as living statues of bronze, their muscles tense beneath sun-browned skin and a map of scars. Elias raised his rifle. The light hit their dark eyes, not afraid, only weary and hungry. The older sister, Naya, turned slightly to shield her sibling and spoke with a hoarse voice. "Please, just let us go." In that instant, Elias saw more clearly the wounds on their arms, red rope marks still etched into their skin, dried blood crusted around their wrists. He slowly lowered his rifle. "If you need anything, take it, and then leave." The two looked at each other, then gathered a bit of cornmeal and a few potatoes. No one said thank you, but as they walked away, the younger one, Tala, turned and looked back at him for a long moment, a look caught between gratitude and wariness, as if trying to memorize the face of the man who did not shoot. Elias stood still in the stall, his rifle lowered, heart pounding in the scorched silence. The desert wind blew across the porch roof, carrying fine streaks of dust that floated like smoke. Elias Boone stood on the porch, a cup of cold coffee in hand, staring out at the sun-scorched hills. Since the day those two women left, he had not slept through a single night. Sometimes, in the wind, he would hear distant hoofbeats or the faintest sound of laughter, vague, like a memory. Then one morning, in front of his house appeared two dried fish and a bundle of tobacco leaves, neatly tied with a strip of leather. No words. No tracks. Just a faint scent of smoke. Elias understood the Apache had just said thank you, in their own way. He smiled, placed a fresh bag of cornmeal beside the gift, and quietly walked away. From that moment, an invisible connection began to form. They did not see each other, but they knew the other was there. From time to time, Elias would find barefoot tracks near the well, or a strand of black hair caught on the fence. Once, when he returned from a distant field, someone had swept the horse stall clean and stacked the firewood neatly. He did not need to ask. There were few people in the desert, and gratitude was more often shown through actions than words. One evening, as he was patching the barn roof, the two figures appeared again at the edge of the hills. Naya came first, her broad shoulders catching the red sunlight. Tala followed, tall but softer in her steps, her hair loose in the wind. They approached slowly, without hesitation. Elias set down his hammer and gave a slight nod, a greeting between three people who shared no common language but understood each other through their eyes. That night, they lit a fire in the yard. Elias brought out some salted meat, and Tala offered a bundle of spices. No one spoke much, only the crackle of the wood and the firelight dancing on bronze skins slick with sweat. Naya looked over and spoke, her voice low and steady. "Aren't you afraid of us?" Elias shook his head. "I am more afraid of being alone." The words made Naya smile slightly. A short smile, but enough for him to realize. These two women were not just ghosts of the desert. They, too, were searching for a place to breathe. As night fell, they left without a word. But before vanishing behind the cactus ridge, Tala turned to look back once more, a gaze long and deep, like a breeze that carries something left unsaid. From that day on, the ranch was no longer completely lonely. Elias began rising earlier, smiling more often, and every evening, when the wind shifted, he would look toward the hills where two tall silhouettes would sometimes appear again, quietly watching him like spirits learning to trust in the kindness of humankind. The sun rose like fire, scorching the golden, burnt land. Elias Boone worked shirtless on the fence, sweat soaking through his coarse trousers. Suddenly, the sound of hooves echoed across the ground. He looked up. Naya and Tala appeared, riding two wild ash-colored horses, red dust swirling behind them in a thick cloud. They were no longer shadows on the edge of the hills. They rode straight into the yard, their eyes calm and proud. Naya dismounted, her broad shoulders glinting in the sun, muscles lean and taut like steel. Tala gave a faint smile, picked up a water bucket to help Elias, saying nothing. The three of them worked side by side, in silence, with only the sounds of hammers and their warm breath filling the air. Every now and then, Elias caught their eyes dark, deep, unreadable. He could not name what he felt, reverence, or perhaps a slow-burning flame in his chest. By midday, when the sun bleached the world white, Naya set down her hammer. Her black hair fell across her shoulders. Her voice was low, husky. "How long have you lived alone?" Elias wiped his brow. "Since my father died," Tala chimed in, half teasing. "No woman?" Elias gave a sheepish smile. "No." The sisters exchanged a glance. Then Naya stepped closer, her eyes burning. "I have been craving a man," she said, slowly, clearly. "It has been a long time since I touched anyone. What about you?" The question hit him like a blow to the chest. Elias froze. His heart pounded. He swallowed hard. "Never have." Tala burst into laughter, a rough, raspy sound rising into the breeze. A man untouched by the world. Naya took one more step. The scent of sun-browned skin, sweat, and smoke swirled around them. "Then today, you have lived." She touched him. The kiss came suddenly wild, full of earth and fire. Elias kissed her back, without thinking. Everything he had buried under years of loneliness ignited at once. They pulled each other down into the cellar. The only light came through a narrow crack in the boards. Naya pressed him against the wall, while Tala stood in the doorway, her breath quick, eyes fixed on them. In the thick darkness, three bodies tangled not out of lust, but out of hunger to be touched, to feel real. When their breathing finally calmed, Elias trembled as he sat against the wall. Naya looked up at him, her eyes briefly soft. "You are not like the others," she whispered. "How so?" "You are not afraid to love someone you are supposed to fear." Outside, the desert wind picked up, carrying sand and the scent of distant smoke, a sign that someone was coming. Inside the small cellar, Elias stared through the thin line of light and knew that the fragile piece he had just touched was about to be swept away by a real storm. The desert night was thick as ink. The moon, broken in half, cast a pale light over the ranch, which now held only silence and the breath of hot wind. Elias Boone had just dozed off when the sound of hooves echoed from afar, first scattered, then pounding like thunder. He jumped to his feet, grabbed his Winchester, and looked out the window. From the base of the hill, 20 Apache warriors were approaching, a long line of torches blazing through the night. Firelight danced across faces painted red, eagle feathers swaying in the wind. The whole sky seemed to tilt under their eerie chants. Naya was already on the porch, her hand gripping a long knife, bare shoulders gleaming with sweat. Tala stepped beside her, her eyes cold and terrifyingly calm. "They're coming for us," Naya said quietly. Elias nodded slightly. "And me? You're just the excuse they need to kill." The first torch was thrust into the ground at the edge of the yard, flames leaping taller than a man. The leader, a man built like a stone pillar, his face painted with a red skull, shouted out, "Naya, Tala, come back. Come back now, or we will burn this place to the ground." No one answered. Only the wind and the fire hissed through the old boards. Elias stepped off the porch, rifle in hand, eyes shining in the firelight. He did not tremble. He stood in the open ground, back turned toward the two women, as if he himself were the final wall. "She chose to stay," he said, voice low but clear, "and I choose to die with them if I must." Murmurs rose among the warriors, then fell into silence. The leader bared his teeth in a grin. "A little man dares to challenge the blood of our tribe." Elias replied calmly, "No. I challenge the ones who have forgotten what freedom means." That made Naya look at him for a long moment. She stepped forward, shoulder brushing his, and her voice rang out like a drumbeat. "We do not belong to anyone anymore. We choose freedom, and this man." For a moment, the night itself seemed to pause. The warriors looked at one another, torn between law and honor. Some bowed their heads, others clenched their jaws. Then the leader lowered his torch and gave a subtle nod. "Then live, and pay the price of freedom." They turned their horses and rode away. 20 torches slowly disappeared into the distance, like a line of spirits fading into the dark. Elias, Naya, and Tala stood in silence among the ashes, as the wind carried sparks around them. Tala spoke softly, her voice trembling but firm. "We are still alive." Naya looked at Elias. Her hand found his and squeezed tight. "No. Starting tonight, we begin to live." Above them, the moon sank into gray clouds, and in the middle of the scorched land, 3 people stood side by side, small, exposed, but solid as stone before the storm to come. "I am deeply grateful for your presence here. If this story stirred something in you, memories of dusty afternoons, of hoofbeats echoing through your chest, then please subscribe to my channel, so that every day we can sit down together, and I will tell you another tale from the Wild West." The next morning dawned slowly, murky like ash. Smoke still lingered in the wind, drifting across the scorched land. Elias Boone stood on the porch, his hands scratched and raw, eyes fixed on the streaks of soot scattered across the field. Behind him, Naya was wrapping the wound on her shoulder, while Tala tended a small fire, cooking something the scent of dried meat and smoke mixing with the faint trace of old blood. No one spoke, only the wind howled through the broken fence. They had survived the night, but Elias knew that did not mean they were safe. Naya looked up, her voice rough and low after the long night. "They will come back. Maybe this morning. Maybe next month." Elias replied quietly. "I know." Tala added more wood, and the fire flared. "Then why do you not run?" He turned to her, his eyes the color of cooled ash. "I do not want to leave this place. If I go, the ranch dies. But if I stay, it is home. Even if only for a day." The words made Naya pause. In the pale morning light, his sun-worn face seemed carved with a strange kind of resolve. She stepped closer, her hand still trembling, but her voice firm. "Last night, you stood between us and death. No one has ever done that. Not Apache men, not white men." Elias answered softly. "Maybe they never met someone worth doing it for." Naya lowered her head. A tired smile flickered across her lips. Then she said slowly and clearly, "We no longer belong to anyone. Not to a tribe, not to laws. All we have left is each other. And freedom." Tala looked at her sister, eyes filled with both fear and pride. She gave a quiet nod. "Then we choose freedom." They stood together in the morning light, 3 strangers bound by a shared path, a road with no return. That night, as the cold set in, Naya and Tala lay beside Elias in the old cellar. There was no hesitation like before, only the warmth of people who had found shelter after the storm. They did not speak of love, only survival, but in every touch, every breath, life was rekindled. Outside, the wind slipped through the wooden door, sweeping up the ashes of torches long burned out. Elias opened his eyes, staring at the dark ceiling, feeling the warmth of skin beside him. He knew he had lost everything that once meant safety and in return, gained something more precious, a reason to exist. When Naya shifted slightly, her black hair falling across his chest, she spoke in a near whisper. "Last night we died." Elias looked at her and replied gently, "And this morning we were born again." Outside, the wind blew across the gray, burnt fields. But amid the ashes, Elias Boone's ranch had begun to come alive again from the hearts that had just found their freedom. 3 weeks passed, the desert began to change color. Where torches had once scorched the earth, now thin strips of young grass grew, soft as silk. Elias Boone's ranch was no longer silent. The sound of hammers, neighing horses, and warm voices echoed through the air each day. Naya rebuilt the wooden fence, her broad shoulders lined with veins, each hammer strike like a drumbeat. Tala braided rope, retraining the wild horses. She laughed more now, a rare smile from someone who had lived by blood and fire. Elias watched them, not just with admiration, but with something deeper, a kind of peace he had never dared to believe was real. In the mornings, they ate together on the porch, dried meat, bitter coffee, and an air quiet yet full of warmth. "You know," Tala said, squinting under the sun, "when you work, you look more Apache than white." Elias gave a soft chuckle. "Maybe because I no longer know where I belong." Naya set down her tin cup and looked at him. "You belong where you choose to stay." With each passing day, the ranch came back to life along with their hearts. Elias learned to ride the Apache way, and the 2 sisters learned how to laugh, to trust, and to garden. They planted corn, dug a new well, and sometimes sang songs in a language he did not know. But the melodies stirred the air as if old spirits were listening. One afternoon, a rare rainstorm rolled in. The three of them ran out into it, letting the water pour over their hair and shoulders. Naya laughed loudly, droplets clinging to her bronze skin like melting gold. Elias stood watching, and for the first time in years, he felt something bloom in his chest like the first green shoot in dry soil. That evening, they sat by the fire, its red glow casting warm lines across their sun-darkened faces. Elias asked softly, "What if the tribe comes back?" Tala replied, "Then they will see that we lived." Naya added, "And they will know freedom cannot be burned." Their eyes met through the flicker of flames. No words were needed. Each of them understood. Time had turned three exiles into a family. Later that night, Elias stepped outside and looked toward the misty hills. The wind carried the scent of fresh earth and young corn. He turned. Naya stood in the doorway, her shadow silhouetted in the moonlight. She spoke gently. "I used to think strength only came from a clenched fist," he answered. "And now?" Naya smiled and stepped forward, placing her hand on his chest. "Now I know. It comes from here." The wind swept past them, carrying a soft laugh like the breath of the desert after rain. That night, inside the small house, they lay beside each other, not out of desire, but from the quiet joy of people who had finally found a place to belong. Autumn came to the desert, a season where the wind no longer burned, but still carried the scent of dry earth and old smoke. Elias Boone realized he had stopped counting the days. His ranch now echoed with the crowing of roosters, the sound of horses, and the soft laughter of two Apache women every morning. But peace in these lands was always as fragile as a thread. One morning, Tala returned after gathering herbs from the woods. Her face was tense, eyes dark. "Someone followed me," she said, her voice hoarse. Elias glanced at Naya. The older sister understood instantly. No one asked questions. They simply checked their rifles, dimmed the fire at the hearth, and waited. By late afternoon, dust rose from the west. The three stood on the porch, watching as a group of riders slowly emerged in the sunset glow. Not white men, Apache. 20 riders had once come, but now only 6 remained. 6 was enough to kill, enough to carry bad news. The one leading had a long scar across his cheek. He stopped his horse at the gate and looked straight at Naya. "The chieftain has forgiven you, but his son has not," he said in rough English. "He swore he would take the heads of all 3 of you." The air grew heavy. Elias tightened his grip on the Winchester. "What about you?" he asked. The man raised his head, eyes weary. "We only bring words, not knives." Then he turned his horse and rode off, leaving behind a trail of dust and a parting warning. "They will come when the red moon rises." As their shadows faded, Tala shivered. "He will not stop." Naya stepped onto the porch, her gaze oddly calm. "I know, but I will not run either." That night, the wind shifted. Elias checked every rifle, every bullet, laid knives on the table, ready. Naya sat across from him, firelight revealing the scars on her shoulder, each one a life survived. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Letting us stay." Elias looked at her, his voice steady. "No, because since you walked into my life, I finally know I have a heart to lose." Naya was silent for a moment, then said softly, "If they come, do not die, stupid. Live. For this place." He nodded. "I only know one thing. No one will take the woman I love." Outside, the moon began to rise over the ridge, dim, but glowing with an eerie red tint. Tala whispered, "Blood moon." The 3 of them looked at each other unafraid, because sometimes it is only when facing death that we realize true freedom does not lie in running away, but in standing still and loving what we choose to protect. That night, the ranch sank into silence, with only the wind slipping through the wooden roof like the breath of fate drawing near. Dawn rose slowly, as if afraid to break the fragile silence left by the night before. Elias Boone sat on the porch, rifle still in hand, eyes fixed on the horizon. The blood moon had set, and no one had come. Only the wind remained, and the faint scent of grass scorched from the night before. Naya stepped outside, a weathered blanket draped over her shoulders, her sun-kissed skin glowing in the early light. Tala followed, carrying 3 cups of black coffee. No one said a word. They simply watched the sun rise over the hills, its golden rays piercing through the dust, making the world shimmer as if melting into light. After a night of waiting, they understood. Sometimes, the enemy never comes because the fear in your heart has already died. And so began 3 months of harvest. The ranch came fully back to life. Elias built another horse stall. Tala broke in a new herd of wild horses. Naya planted barley over the burned land. By midday, the sound of hammers, laughter, and Apache songs floated in the wind. There were no more lines between host and guest, between white and brown only people, rebuilding their lives from ash. That evening, Elias stood watching the sisters by the fence. Sunset painted their bronze skin in brilliant gold, like 2 living statues shaped by wind and fire. Naya wiped the sweat from her brow and turned to him. "Do you see?" she said. "This land knows how to forgive." Elias stepped forward, placed his hand on hers. "No. It is people who teach the land to forgive." She smiled softly, her dark eyes glinting like still water. "We saved each other, Elias." He nodded, his voice low and warm. "No. You saved me first. I just learned how to live again." Tala stood nearby, quiet, a faintly wistful smile on her face. "That's enough," she said. "In this world, what more could anyone really ask for?" As the sun touched the hills, they sat on the porch, the last light of day bathing their faces. Elias poured whiskey into 3 tin cups and raised his glass. "To freedom," Naya added, "to those brave enough to pay the price to live." Tala smiled. "And to tomorrow, even a short one is worth it." The wind rose, cooling the land once scorched by fire. Barley swayed gently like waves. 3 souls, a lonely rancher, 2 outcast warriors sat together in a quiet warmth, where no one owed anyone anything, and only freedom remained. There are battles not fought for land, but to keep the human part of the heart alive. Out here, on this red-dusted land where the laws of survival are often crueler than bullets, kindness still blooms like wildflowers growing between rocks. Elias did not pull the trigger when he could have, and in that moment, a different world was born, one where freedom is not something granted, but something discovered through the courage to care, to choose love over fear. Because sometimes, even the smallest act of kindness can be enough to free 3 imprisoned souls from war, from prejudice, and from the darkness inside themselves. Above all, I wish you health and happiness, wherever in the world you may be. I love you, my dear listeners of Wild West Storytelling. Tell me, what did this story make you feel? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Type the number 8 if you enjoyed this story. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping tales from the Wild West.